Good morning, fellow fly tyers. I'm James Brown from Veneta, Oregon. First fly on the agenda today that we'll be doing is a muddler marabou. It's a variation of a muddler minnow, just a few little differences that we can do. Some of the materials that we're going to be using is a red hackle feather for the tail, braided diamond for the body. On the wing, we're going to be doing an underwing with olive calf tail, olive marabou, a little bit of crystal flash, a little bit of peacock for a topping. Then we'll do a hair collar out of olive deer hair and trim the head. So we're going to take this one out that was completed, and we'll go ahead and start on another one. I'm using a 5263 TMCO. 52, 62, or 63, either one will work, depending on what size that you want to take and do. Using an olive thread, using 6/0, if you can find it. You can use 3/0, which give you a little bit more capability whenever you do your hair wing, or whenever you do the hair spinning, which might help out. So we'll go ahead and take and come back about quarter away from the eye of the hook. We'll wrap on a quick foundation. Snip off the end. We'll take out a good healthy pinch of red hackle fibers. And we'll make it about 2/3 of the length of the hook. We'll tie it in rather tight, making sure it stays on top of the hook. It's nice and straight. Take our braided, our gold braid. I tie it in at the beginning, lead it all the way back so I don't have as much of a bump. Take my thread back forward very tightly. Take and lay that braid right up to where I started my thread wraps. Tie that off. I'll take the scissors, trim off the end. I'll take my olive calf. Don't need a whole bunch, don't need a little. Whoops. And we'll take off a snippet of calf tail, about like that. Pull out the short ones. You can, or you don't have to necessarily stack it. I just barely stack it just to knock the short ones out, because you want a little bit of that tapered effect. This olive calf tail will lay at the tie-in point of the thread, extending back up over the tail, but not past the tail. Take and tie that off. Calf tail not being hollow, you have to use pretty good pressure on it to keep it from spinning around the hook. So on top of the calf tail, then we're going to put in a little bit of green crystal, or a little bit of gold crystal flash. There's probably about 10, 12 strands there. I'll even the ends, so I've got a nice square bunch at the ends to tie off, so I don't have a bunch of buildup whenever I get ready to do my collar. Trim that on an angle so it'll kind of blend into the top of the olive hair. I take a marabou feather. You got a bunch of short unwily pieces at the bottom. I'll take and strip them off. Then I'll take and find the top of the feather. I'll take and cut out that middle stem back about an inch or so that all I've got is nice, even marabou fibers. I'll lay that right on top. It goes back to the even with the end of the tail. And again, we wrap that down. So everything's being wrapped right on top of everything else. Cut that off. Then on top of that, we're going to take about 7 or 8 Peacock curls, I've already went through. I want to try to even the ends. Whenever we even the ends, just pull the longer ones down even with the shorter ones so that they're all coming out at about the same place. Make for a little bit neater looking fly. This indicates the dark back on the sculpin or on the minnow or whatever it is you're trying to imitate. That lays right up over the top, back even with the marabou, extending just a little bit past, and we tie it down right on top. I'll center that a little bit, snug it up. I'll trim off that. I got some olive deer hair here. Whenever you buy deer hair, you want to check the deer hair. 3 things that you're looking for is the coarseness of the hair, the length of the hair, and the underfur. The longer the hair, the better. It gives you more working material whenever you're taking spinning a collar on. I don't want a bunch of underfur, the fuzz underneath, because I got to pull all that out. And you want a good length where you can cover the length of the head of the fly and the collar without having to fight the material. I pull off a good healthy bunch. There's quite a bit there. And I'll take and pull out any loose stuff, any short stuff. We'll put it in a hair stacker right quick. Even those tips up. If I can get it in there. There we go. Even them up. Another little thing that you can take and do is I got some dyed rabbit fur here. What I'll take and do with that is I'll just barely lightly dub that on the thread. Just enough so I can get 2 or 3 turns. This helps cover up the butts of all those materials. Plus it gives it a little bit of an impression of a gill covering underneath the collar of the fly. Take out my olive deer hair. I have found that whenever you're doing these blasted things, it's almost impossible to spin this collar on there because you have to get it up close enough to those thread butts, or the other material butts, and to get it up close enough to get it to spin. By the time it spins, it drops away from the butts of that other material right here, and it leaves the gap in there. So what I take and do is I take and lay that material on top. I'll take my thumb and 4 fingers and I'll push that stuff all the way around with my fingers. Then I'll take my wrap of thread. I'll pull that down tight. Now I'm right up against the butts and I've covered all the way around with that material. I'll spread all that deer hair out of the way. If you got a thin spot, it doesn't hurt. Just take a little bit deer hair, and where that thin spot's at, what you can take and do, you just take and lay it up over that thin spot like that and wrap through it. And it'll flare out, and you can cover up that thin spot real easy. Then take and go ahead and wrap through the rest of that hair and get that material all pulled back. You need some sort of a device. This is a hair stacker. It's just a little piece of twisted metal with a groove in it that fits over to the shank of that hook to push that material back, to pack it back so it makes it nice and tight. Like that. So then we're going to need another clump of olive hair. If a person wants to, you can add different colors of hair. It's a lot like doing bass bugs. You can do different colors of hair. And same way here, you can put in a black band, a white band, whatever color band that you wanted to take and do. I cut the tips off this time so I don't have to fight them as much whenever we trim it with the razor blade. So I'll lay that bunch right up on top of the hook shank, take a loose turn. Now it'll spin for me because I'm on that bare shank of that hook. So now we're just about done with the head of this thing, except for the trimming part. And again, I use my hair stacker. Yeah, and it's well up in there. It's going to give me a pretty good, decent looking head. Now I'll go ahead and finish that off, and then we'll trim it. A lot of people have a hard time, and it takes a lot of practice too, but they have a hard time of getting that initial cut with the razor blade. You want a sharp razor blade, a nice sharp razor blade. And once you set an angle, don't change that angle. You have the angle like this, and then you do this on the bottom and then move it on the sides. Your angles all get off. So once you start your angle, try not to change that angle as you trim that stuff off. It takes a little bit of practice, and it's better to take off a whole bunch a little at a time than trying to take off a whole bunch at one time. So just slowly keep turning that thing around, working that butts off, being careful not to cut into your collar. There's the collar. Now I got a few butt pieces over here that didn't want to come out right, so I just take and grab them, pull them up like that. Pull them back up to the head so they're easier to get out. Then whenever I'm done, I take my head cement. I like using lacquer. I use a thin lacquer, because I can take that lacquer and just dip it in there and it soaks right in. I don't have to worry about the head cement jamming up the eye of the hook. And that lacquer will soak right down in there to those thread wraps. Just a variation of a muddler minnow done in olive, using marabou to give us a little bit more movement. Size 6, and that's on a 5262 or 5263 by Tamco. Thank you very much for your time. I hope you have a good day and enjoy the rest of the video. This is James Brown from Bonita, Oregon, saying thank you.
Hi, we're here today. We're going to tie the Irv emerger. It's the caddis emerger that I recently developed last summer. I was fishing the upper Columbia River right below the Canadian border. The fish were really targeting on the emerging pupa as it swam just below the surface, and I had to have the fly that would stay high in the film and simulate the movement of the swimming pupa, and this is what I developed. We're going to use a hook today, a Ricky 135 scale hook, and I like this hook. It's heavy and it allows the emerging part to hang down below the dry part. I put the hook in the vise and take the thread and put a good thread base on the hook. Going back to the end of the hook. As I said, this is just a newly recently developed fly been developed in, and it stitches extremely well. And some of my stitching partners say I've revolutionized the caddis stitching with this. All I know is it's sure fun to hook them and play the big fish in the upper Columbia River. We're gonna do some fine wire now for a rib. Pull some off there. And tie that in down the shank. And just like hang out the back then, so it's not in your way. I tie some of it down around the bend of the hook to give it the curve of the caddis nymph. I'll come up here and take a little bedding wax. Just gonna make a little bedding noodle. I've been using this tiny little bed. I like how it glistens and can make this rather small, thin. Just touch it. Do a little crispness on your thread. That's probably gonna be enough. Now you see, I start this dubbing up about mid-body. That's to help you add some shoulders to the nymph. It also helps me catch the first few baskets so it's not going to be, anywhere nervy and loose. They have a tendency to want to come off the shank. Well, I line this up towards the eye, kind of making a nice little uniform body, and as I come up, I want to be aware of those slight shoulders on the nymph. Then I'll do it like that. Then I'll take the wire. I'll power that through the body, the tri-lobe bedding, and that's going to reinforce the bedding. And I'm also pulling the bedding down into the hook shank, adding durability. It's also making the fly somewhat smaller. Stop it there, give some room to put a thorax on. The thorax is slightly darker, and I almost always use Aussie frill or some darker depths of that. It's easy to use a peacock frill, and sometimes I use the under fur. It's just what I have handy here today. So, come up like that. Now I'm going to take the darker dub. In this case, I'm going to use the same dub though, because the darker dub is over there in the box. So we're going to fudge a little. Put a thorax on, then come in, leave a little room at the front there for your soft hackle, which is going to be Hungarian partridge. Pick a nice Hungarian partridge, come in here on the back of the rump and pick your feather that's going to be suitable for the size of your hook. I also like the darker partridge as opposed to the gray partridge that's found on the neck. So I'll come in here, I'll take my small feather, prepare to set by pulling off the travel plume and the edge. Real soft, webby stuff you're not going to need to add too much bulk. Okay, I'll apply that right in there behind the eye of the hook. Oh, and guys, I didn't get something else out of that box I need, so hackle pliers are in my box. All right, now that we've got the Hungarian partridge fitted on for a soft hackle, we take our hackle pliers, hook onto the center of your feather right there in the stem of the vein, and I have the thread behind the feather. I'm going to pull that through the really important. I'm just going to line this around. If I can get 2 to 3 turns of this small hackle, now I'm going to take it up at this hang. I'm going to take my thread and pull that through the Hungarian partridge to help tie it down to reinforce it. Put a couple in front. I'll get rid of this stemless section, but I'll be adding too much bulk otherwise, because the rest of it in the hackle. I snip the center section out, pull back on that, put a few in front to help the hackle fibers lay back, like such. Now I'll put a lip finish on this soft hackle portion. Really, all we do is construct the soft hackle. We finish the fly off. Now here comes the unique part that's different than anything you've ever seen. I'm going to take some stainless steel, single strand, that's very important, it has to be single strand, 38-pound test stainless steel leader. And I'm going to cut myself a piece roughly 1.25 inches long. About like such. I take some smooth pliers that are smooth inside that have no ridges, otherwise this small wire will get in the ridges and be hard to do. And make like a staple that didn't go into the wall and didn't work and was a dead. So I take my pliers, turn them on both ends of the wire like this, and I just bend it over, producing that staple. And as I told you, it looks like a staple was meant to go into the wall and didn't. Now I take this newly made little wire appendage and I'm going to put that through the eye of the hook, the trailer, and now I'm going to put that piece of stainless steel leader right into the regal vise. And I'll leave the fly like such. Now, it's important that there's 2 little wire tags cross. After you're going to stick your thread in there and pull the 2 together. Stick your thread in there, pull the 2 together in that little wire cross. And you can see I've pulled those 2 ends down together like this, and now they're held snug by the tying thread. Put a good thread base on this stainless steel as it is very, very slippery, and it'll allow your elk hair wing you're going to be putting on here shortly to slip off. So it's very critical that you get a good thread base on this stainless steel wire. You cannot use piano wire because it will rust, and other wires will rust. You have to kind of use a single strand stainless steel, as it will not rust. I'm putting a good thread base on. Now, I want to have a ring eye hook out front to tie the leader to, and I want to have it swivel like this in the back of the trailer shut. So I'm going to do a half turn. Take your small pliers, grip onto the eye of that section and do the half turn. Like so. There you have a ring eye hook out front to attach the leader. Now, because that stainless steel leader is so slippery, I don't want my thread base to move around any. I'll take a little head indent. I'll put right on that thread base that I applied over the stainless steel leader. Now, while that is drying, I'll come in and do the pieces clumped elk hair, and I like using the elk hair off the neck of the name of the elk. It allows a much tighter wing, and I can get more hair on there, so it'll float very, very well. But elk hair off the neck of the name will not flay and flare all over. So I take a fairly generous clump because it is such nice elk nut, it allows me to use more of it. Clean out your underbrush, your underjaw, your under hair. There's like a lot of it. And this will prevent the elk hair from scratching well. Pick out the wild ones on the end. Now I'll stack this up. Now, place the thread about in the middle of that wire appendage belt, slightly in front of the middle. Take your stacked wing. And you can see that's a fairly diverse amount of elk hair. It looks like a little paintbrush on the mouth. See, I'll pull it out. And like I said, that's kind of bit, so I might thin it down a little bit if I choose to. But what I want is a nice little paintbrush. You can see how it almost takes a little fine paintbrush. I'm going to set that on top of my appendage. Come in here and take a couple of good laps on it. Keep the wing on top of your appendage. Take some very sharp scissors. Pick up on this, slide your scissors in along that wire appendage. Trim off the excess elk. You're going to now, leaving a nice small wing on top. I'll back off on the sled and back. I'll put the sled up on in the front portion where I want to have this tied down. If I have any wild ones, I can trim them up the way I will choose to. Take your whip finisher, whip finish right there in the tie down spot. It's only using 2 of them. So that's your thread. 2 little nail polish. Just carry this thread out. And there's one herb. You can see how it will hang down below like that as it's floating. And what will impede the movement of the emerging nymph portion is just you have any hair that comes around to the underneath when you tie it on. And if that be the case, just take your scissors in here and snip out a small portion that might have gotten down around where it will impede your movement of your trailer. This one wasn't bad. You can see how just knitting the sea hairs out adds to the movement of the fly. And that will ride the elk hair keeps the fly on top. The Stab hook hangs down below with the emerging nip on it, and it's a very successful fly. Once again, the fly is called the Earth and was developed in the summer of 2005. Thank you.
Hello, my name is David Barlow. I'm from Salem, Oregon, originally from Britain, and I'm going to tie for you today a Scottish Atlantic salmon fly called the Ackroyd. This is a long-shanked blind eye Alec Jackson hook. I've already attached silk gut for the eye. I'm going to begin by tying on the tag assembly. I'm using 6/0 Flymaster thread. And the tag is flat silver tinsel. Just going to attach that with a couple of wraps and then begin winding it toward the back of the hook, which is not secure in my vise. And now it is. And then I'm going to double back over that back to the tie-in point. I'm going to take off a couple of wraps, and there is the tag. Next, we're going to put on the tail, which is a golden pheasant crest. Just to give a little history, this fly was designed around 1876. It's a fairly simple fly for Atlantic salmon. You just want to make sure that tail is nice, straight up and down, not tipped over to one side. I can see that slightly tipped to one side, so I'm going to take that back off. First wrap is loose and progressively getting tighter. So there's the tail. Over the tail is going to be a little veiling. The veiling is golden pheasant tippet, just a very small feather. I'm just going to roll that slightly in my hand, set that on top of the hook, and the first wrap is loose, applying pressure downward and then securing. So there is a tag, tail, and tail veiling. The next step is to put on a butt, which is ostrich herl. This is black ostrich herl. From the root, I'm just going to strip back a couple of the fibers. To make sure this is going on the right way. Just attach that. There'll be about 3 wraps of this. To form a butt. Okay. Notice I haven't cut anything off yet. I can now secure that so it makes for a good strong fishing fly. We'll start going up into the body now, forming the body sections. This is a 2-section fly. Okay. Now I need to tie in the first rib. This is fine, flat silver tinsel. Widen back toward the butt. Also, this fly, I think, as with most of the D flies, the Scottish D, are not expensive flies to tie, which is atypical, I think, for most Atlantic salmon tying, where the feathers are rather rare and very expensive. That's not true for this type of fly. Okay, I'm going to tie in a yellow hackle. It's just a chicken feather. Trim that. So that will be the hackle. It'll go over the first section of the fly. Notice lots of securing wraps. And this section of the body, the first half of the body, is dubbed. I'm going to use seal dubbing, but I'm going to dub it on a loop formed of silk. This is Japanese silk. It's not absolutely necessary to do it this way, but I like the effect, so I've now attached silk, and I'll come back up to about the midsection. I'm going to take the silk and split it. I hope. Maybe I'm not going to split it all the way. I'll tell you, the first few wraps I would want to do of just silk anyway. Okay. I'm going to take, this is a blend of seal. You don't need to do seal. Most dubbing will work for this. And this is a blend of yellow with just a little bit of orange. I'll just loosely lay that over the silk. The silk will tend to grip that very well indeed. Then I'll take the other half of the silk, place that together in a loop, and then twist. Okay, now we'll start to dub this on. The nice thing about dubbing on silk is if the dubbing starts to pull out when fished, you maintain the color because the silk is underneath. Okay. Taking wraps off and then tying off that. Okay, now we're going to bring the silver tinsel through the dubbing. Tie that off. Now I'm going to follow that with the hackle. It should follow right behind the tinsel. If you get a nice webby hackle, you don't have to do much folding. This is a fairly webby hackle. Now I said that this was going to be a half and half body. If you notice, that is actually not halfway along the body. Typically when you have 50-50 bodies for these types of flies, it's actually not truly 50-50, it's a little bit more than a third. Aesthetically, you'll see why that works out a little bit later on. I have a little bit of time, so one extra step. This fly originally had a mid-body butt. If you're not a fly tyer, you're probably laughing at a mid-body butt, but you attach another ostrich herl, which will separate the two sections of this body. Okay. Now the front section, there's two ribs on the front. We're going to do large flat silver. And then we are going to do an oval behind that. And then I'm going to attach a hackle. The original hackle for these flies is often heron, but heron is not a legal feather to possess. This is dyed black blue-eared pheasant, a very nice feather, very similar to heron. I'll just fold that back. These were notoriously rather large flies. I'm on a 1.5 Alec Jackson blind eye here, but it was not uncommon to have these flies in the 8 and 10-aught range, so 5 or 6 inches long. So this is a fairly small acroid. Just going to make sure that feather is not going to break. Give it a little tug. I'm going to bring the thread forward. And the body in the front is going to be black Japanese silk, which I know I had somewhere in front of me just a short while ago. Here it is. I'm just going to attach that at the front here. Silk is very sticky. It'll grab your fingers, as you can see it grabbing mine there. Okay, and then just going to wrap that back. Some people will wind silk wearing silk gloves so as not to catch it on their fingers, which may be a little bit, the skin may be a little bit rough. As you can tell, I probably don't work for a living, so my hands are fairly smooth. All right. So there's a couple of myths to dispel about Atlantic salmon tying with this fly. One is that they're very expensive. This is not an expensive series of flies to tie. There's no real rare and unusual materials in this. And the second myth is that Atlantic salmon flies take hours to tie, which I hope to dispel that myth by quickly tying this acroyd. So I'm going to start off with the flat silver, just do some nice open wraps. I like to tie this off on the underside. That way any bulk that builds with this won't interfere with any wing set that I have going on later on. I'm then going to follow right behind that with the oval. And again, tying off on the underside. These are metal tinsel, so I have to be very careful that they don't cut the thread. Now I'm going to go in close and trim. Okay, now I'm going to follow the oval with the stem of this heron substitute. And tie that off on the underside. Now there is an option with this fly of putting a throat of teal on it or not. I think I will go ahead and put the teal on this fly. I'm just teasing the heron underneath just to kind of get it out of the way for a moment and just squeezing it. You'll get a nice lay of the hackle there. I'm going to select a teal, nicely barred teal feather, and just pull back on that. I'm going to tie this in at the tip. Trim that. Just fold it with your fingers. Just a couple of wraps. Do fine. Let's see. Do one more wrap. And again, I tied off on the underside. Just going to tease those hackles either side just to push them down below the hook shank so it doesn't interfere with the wing. Now the wing on these flies originally would have been turkey. On the acroid you could use I think the first acroids were tied with cinnamon turkey. The white-winged acroid, which is the one I'm tying here, is white turkey, but I'm going to actually use goose. White turkey is not that easy to find, actually, of high quality. Goose is much easier to find, and I like goose, and it ties well. So what I'm going to do is take a right and a left. I'm going to just tease out a section. You want to make sure there's no fiber twists in here. I'm going to cut about a 1/4 inch section. So that is out, that's one side. And that will be the wing, for me as a right-handed tyer, that will be, off the right side of the feather, will be the far wing today. Now I need to find a matching left. And that will be my near wing. So I don't know if I can show on the camera. I'm assuming this camera here. You can see these strips. I need to get them down to the same width. This one's a couple of fibers off. So I just go up from the base to the tip. Now, there's a number of ways you can put these wings on. Just make sure they're nice and get the tips lined up. And then what I'm going to do, I'm going to put these on at the same time, folded them alongside each other. It's a very similar way to doing a spay wing, but the D has a little bit of a different characteristic to it, and I'll show you in a moment. But there is the wing. So I'm now going to set, there's 2 slips there. I'm going to set that wing on. I'm just going to let them fold very slightly down either side of the hook shank, I hope. Oh, I have to do that again. Always the tricky part of the flies is to do the wings. I have to practice. Apparently I need to practice as well. Okay. Okay. Wow, that feather really is not cooperating there. There we go. So the first wrap is going to be loose and just gently cinch down. Second, third, fourth, fifth, those are just insurance wraps, and don't let go, just sweep it to the back. Let's see how it comes out. You do not want these wings on top to be zipped together. You want them to separate. D flies have a typical V-shaped on top, so you want them to separate. And you also want them to sit low. Take that off, reset that. Okay. If you look on top, I don't know if you can see on top there, but you've got that separation, that V-shaping. So now I'm going to go in close and trim. without trimming the gut loop off the fly. All right. And start to form the head. And then the final touch is to put jungle cock. These are matching jungle cock. And on this particular fly, they'll set what we call drooping, so it's actually going to go below the hook shank, pointing back towards the point of the hook. And just to help this along, I've peeled back some of the fibers on this feather, and now I'm going to just compress the stem a little bit just to help it set. So I'll lay that along the far side to begin with. Loose wrap. There's one. Compress the stem. Do the same on this side. Should never tie Atlantic salmon flies with even if they're going to go into a box, a presentation case. You should never tie them as only one-sided, in my opinion. You should always put the materials on both sides. I think it's a false economy to only use half the materials. Okay, I'm going to finish up. Form a nice head. Whip finish this. I'm going to put a clear head cement on this. This is Celia. Just put a dab. Just to let you know that blind eye hooks are readily available now, and it actually is easier to tie these types of flies to set wings on blind eyes than it is on return loop eyes. So there is an acroid, also known as the poor man's Jock Scott.
Hi, my name is Dionisio Don Y. Abing, and I'm from the Rainland Flycasters in Astoria, Oregon, one of the founding members. And the fly that I'm going to tie today is the Western Amylitis. The pattern itself is listed in Dave Hughes and Rick Hafley's book on Western hatches several eons ago. Anyway, I have over the years tried to find a dry fly pattern that would work well for sea run cutthroat in the Pacific Northwest. And in doing so, I came across a couple of hatches that meet the trick, and they, thanks to Dave and Rick Hafley's, Dave Hughes and Rick Hafley's research, we were able to, or I was able to discover the Western Amylitis as the an important hatch for sea run cutthroat that are high in their migration route to their spawning grounds in the waters around Clatsop County or Pacific Northwest. One of the main ingredients that I want to talk about real briefly is the quality of material for this particular dry fly pattern. I've found through the years that the best is Hoffman grade hackles, and this one here in particular is an original from Henry Hoffman's farms when he had them in Warrington, Oregon. And you'll notice it's a grizzly neck that has been bleached and dyed a dark brown and a light brown textured color here, which helps break up the pattern in the Western Amylitis, which is basically a yellow-brown, predominantly dark brown, Coachman brown style fly pattern. And the hooks that I like to use are difficult to find in some places, and it's the Mustad 98 842, which is the up-eyed hook. It's a fairly light wire hook, and there's certain turtle knot here that you could tie on there. Makes the fly really work well in fast water. The pattern is fairly simple to follow through here. We'll just show you that the material, the individual hackle, you can see is broken up in here, and it makes for a realistic pattern. The body is a product from Robert Borden. Originally, the pattern was tied with brown floss and yellow floss from England, and boar's hair for the tail. And since the evolution of this extended body fly that is commercially produced by Robert Borden has made this pattern even easier to tie, faster to tie, and readily available to use to fish for the sea run cutthroat. Now, the fly body, I don't know if you could see that. Can you see that fairly well? Okay. I was going to, can I put this in front of it like that? Okay. You can see that it's a small extended body, tied on monofilament, and then there's a pair of tails right there. Now this one here has already been colored, the correct color for the Western Amylitis. And what I do is I get these in the in white, and then dye them or color them with Pantone markers, the body. I start first with the yellow marker and coat the entire body with the yellow marker, and this is actually a lemon yellow marker. And then, because it's already segmented, I take the fine point from the prismatic color, and this is a dark umber color, and carefully color the segmented sections. As you can see, there's the brown, predominantly brown hue, and the yellow peeking through the body, which is what you want to have when you make this mayfly happen. And then the other ingredient is a product that's also difficult to find, but it's by Tyrite, and they're vinyl type of veined wings. They're realistic looking. If you tie these in a spinner fashion, they won't cast very well. But if you tie them in a dun fashion, which the wings are tied straight up or nearly or slightly separated, the fly will cast easier and work well for you. When the sea runs are held up or holding up in the clear pools, very slow moving water, this pattern is most effective if you tie it with a post wing and a parachute hackle. But for our purposes here, I'm going to tie it with the standard wrap of hackle, so that we use it for the fast water sections of creeks where the sea run are opportunistic feeders, and they'll be in there feeding in their feeding lanes, doing their survival skills. And so we start with a size 14 hook, and I'm using the camel colored 8/0 thread by Unithread. And you just want to build a little base, not much, for the wing and the tie-in of your extended body. Let's see if we can get a better one here. Okay. Now the extended body will be, you want to take the loop material, bring it right over the top, and tie in. It'll look just about like so. A couple of loose wraps, anchor it down. Then just position your body. There we go. Okay. Trim off your excess there. Bring your thread up. Now get your veined wings. You can see there's a space. Bring it from the bottom. Excuse me. Make sure the shiny side, or the predominantly veined side, is on the outside. A loose wrap. Then position them again. It's kind of tricky, but you have to get the wings just correctly. Sorry. Well, sometimes it doesn't work, so start over again. Sorry about that. Ooh. There we go. Tough day at the hairdresser. Normally it isn't this difficult. I guess I'm just too nervous. Couple of wraps. Another wrap. Another wrap. My God. Hang on. There we go. Trying to get a little bit of symmetry there. Okay. Yeah, like I say, normally it doesn't take that long. You want to trim off some of this loose. And that'll fit about so. Now we'll switch to a black 8/0 thread for the head. Come in, loose wrap, come around, forward. Just wrap your hackle. Once in a while you'll get a barbule in the way. Just take care of that here in a minute. Do a whip finish. There we go. Straighten out the wings a little bit. Take your get a couple of those out of there. And there's your Western Amylitis.
I'm going to be tying a October caddis pupa today. The hook size is a Targus 2457 size 8 with a 3/32 bead head and a crystal flash underbody, amber medium rib, and a second rib of orange ostrich herl. I'm going to be using some black thread and start it on the hook. And I'm going to tie the crystal flash in and double it back over so that it doesn't pull out. Next, I'm going to put in the amber vinyl rib. And secure it down. Then the two ostrich herls. And I'll wrap them all the way down into the, about halfway down into the bend of the hook. And I just broke my thread. And I'm just going to switch to a different color. Okay, I've got this pretty well secured. I'm going to start by wrapping the crystal flash up the body. And we'll secure it. Going to leave a tag of about 1 inch on top. I'm going to wrap the amber rib up, and leaving a small spacing in between each wrap. And I'll tie that off. Cut off the tag. And then I'm going to spiral the ostrich herl in between each wrap of the vinyl ribbing. And secure that. And I'll fold back the crystal flash. And trim it just about to the hook bend. I have a piece of Hungarian partridge that I'm going to use for the legs. And I'll tie that in wet style. Trim it off. Sorry about that. I'll fold each wrap back as I go. Tie that off. Go ahead and sweep all of the legs back. Secure them in. And use a couple of peacock herl for the collar. Just twist them into a rope. Got away from me. Trim it off. Put a whip finish on it so that gets in there. Put one more. Make sure all the legs are rotating around the body. And it's done. And that's
I'm going to be tying a Serendipity. It's a real nice little easy tie to fly to tie, I'm sorry. Get going here, tongue getting in my way. It's going to be a bead head soft hackle pattern. It's going to be a little bit different than the standard. So we'll get her started here and we'll take you through it step by step. First thing we're going to do is get our thread tied on and just get it started. And then the material we use is Zelon or Darlon. Either one, you take your choice. And this is going to be a red one, and we tie this in several different colors. And we just tie it on, and we want it to end right here, start right here. And this is where we're going to end our body, and we'll find out why here in just a second. We wind back. We get all the way back onto the bend of the hook, because we want the curvature. And we take our thread back forward. And since I'm using a rotary vise, I'm going to take 2 1/2 hitches here so that my thread doesn't jump off on me. Get it out of the way. Now, we have to twist the Darlon because I want this to be a segmented fly. And I've made a little tool here. You can do this several different ways. So we put on here, we take it, and we just spin it. Now, it's real tight like a rope, and we wrap it on, and we get this real nice little segmented body. Nice part about a rotary vise. If you have a standard vise that has a head that tilts and a head that rotates, you can lay your head sideways perfectly flat, and then you can do the same thing by loosening your rotating nut. And we bring her forward to where we tied in, and then we just tie this off. And we tie off on top of our hooks. Almost all your materials will be tied off on top. We take 2 wraps in back, and we take 2 wraps in front, and then we just clip this off. Now you'll see that we have a very nice segmentation there. Now at this point, I take another 2 quick 1/2 hitches in here. I'll just put 3 on it, and we just cinch it up, and then we cut the thread off. Now I'm using a gold bead and for the eye on this, and they have a large pocket on one side and a small hole on the front. What we do is we push it far enough to where it slips right over our Darlon. You can see where it's got over. Now that's trapped the Darlon, and it's going to hold it for you. And then we take our thread and we wrap her on, put her back on. Oh, somebody got away with my feathers here. Okay. You can use a soft hen. This is from a hen neck, and I like the barring on this, or you can use a partridge. What we do is we don't need a whole lot. We're going to peel the soft stuff off of here and turn around, and we need just about that much. And then we're going to we tie it in by the tip. So I just got rid of the garbage. We tie this on here. Now at this point we don't need to. You can just let your bobbin hang out of the way. Hook your hackle pliers on. I'll get it on there yet. There we go. We bring it up here. Wet your fingers a little bit and pull this hackle back. Now see how it's pointing back? I want it to flow back over the fly. And we take 3 wraps, and that's all we want, just 3 wraps of this hen on here. Like so. We tie her off. And then we gently clip it. Now we pull it all back so we can tie it down. Now you can see that we've got this nice little webby effect right here on the back of the fly. And for the head, we just use some black dubbing. You can use chenille, you can use just about anything you want. I like to use a dubbing on there. Just put a little dubbing on our thread, about that much, not very much. We wrap it here, we wrap back on it towards the eye that we put on there, a little bead eye. And we bring this forward right there, and you can see. Now, we're not going to use head cement on this. What I'm going to use super glue. Darn stuff is too cheap anymore. We can get this to come out of here. Here we come. But just a little drop on there. Hey, 3 wraps. And then even though I use super glue, I still whip finish. And we put this on here, 4 turns, and we clip this guy off. And you got yourself a nice little beadhead serendipity. That gives you an idea how quick you can tie this fly. And it's a go-getter, and it catches a lot of fish. Gentlemen, that's it.
Hi, my name is Hal Gordon. I'm from Aloha, Oregon, and I'd like to demonstrate to you today woolhead sculpin. And what I've got here is a straight shanked hook with a straight eye, and I've already put a little bit of wire on there to give it weight. I'm going to go ahead and wrap the thread to secure the wire on. And I like to weight all my sculpin patterns because the sculpin is one of the few fish that doesn't have an air bladder, so it sits right on the bottom of the river. So there I've got my wire secured down. Now I'm going to use some straight cut rabbit strips here for the tail. Tie that on right there. And you don't want this tail too long or it'll get wrapped around underneath the hook, so I like to keep it fairly short here. Next I'm going to make a body of the same rabbit. I'm just going to palmer it up the body, so I'm going to tie it in at the same point I put the tail on. Bring the thread up towards the eye, and then wrap that skin side by side all the way up the body. And that'll give the sculpin a thicker body. It'll undulate in the water there. So bring it up, leave quite a bit of room there for the head. So I'm going to tie it off about right there. Clip that off. Next I'm going to really secure that there and put a thread base up for the rest of the head. Now because sculpins are fairly flat, I'm going to cut the bottom of that rabbit fur off so it does lay flat. Also the skin part of the rabbit is a lighter color, and so it gives the belly of the fly just a little bit lighter color than the top of the fly here. Okay, at this point I'm going to put in some pectoral fins, and this is just Hungarian partridge. And I did put a little dab of cement here to make it a little bit stiffer so it wouldn't turn. I'm going to tie those on both sides like that. The fins aren't necessary if you want to tie this fly a little bit faster, but I think it just looks a little bit nicer here. So there's our fins. Clip that off. Okay, next I'm going to take some ram's wool, which is right here, and you want it fairly long. So I'm going to clip that off. And I want the sculpin head to be variegated, two different colors. So I'm going to take this and put a little bit of brown wool on top of it. Like that. Put the two together, keep it flat. I'm going to pull it together and tie that over the back of the fly like that. Cinch that down, and then pull that wool back and tie it off. Now most people tie a woolhead sculpin by spinning the wool like you spin deer hair. Here's a new technique that I've learned. You take a little finish nail like this, you put the finish nail underneath the wool, pull the wool over the top of it, then you go ahead and wrap. There, so you have a little loop in the wool. Take about 3 wraps, pull that wool tightly back over the top of itself again. Cinch that down. And here's the trick. You pull the nail out very carefully, insert your scissors in there, and cut that wool. And that will flare the wool just like you had spun it. So go ahead and do a second loop here. Put the nail in. Oops. Get you another loop there. Pull the wool back. Cinch it down. Nail comes out, clip, and there you go. You can see how it's starting to get a variegated effect there. Also, by using this technique, it kind of keeps the sculpin head flat, like the real fish. Kind of, it'll be rounded on the top and flat on the bottom, like that. One more clip. Okay. Now we want to put on some gills before we do the last couple wraps there. Also, if you'll look at underneath the fly, there'll be a little space there where you see the thread. We kind of want to hide that thread. So I'll take a little bit of red polypropylene yarn, and you just want to fold that around the thread like that. Bring it up underneath the hook. Pull that wool back without getting any caught in your thread, and just tie that down. And you'll see how that wool, the red wool, will just kind of lay flat underneath your hook there. That'll hide those wraps. Now you can continue on. Do another loop of for the head right there. 3 wraps there, pull it back. Okay, now to finish off the head, I'll take some of the wool that was left over and I'll put a little dubbing on the thread there. And that will keep the front of the head, the wool sticking straight up. And it'll also force a little bit of the red yarn to go back. So just a little bit of dubbing there. And we'll go ahead and tie that off. Then we just take our scissors and trim that head. You don't have to trim much because by using the nail, it tends to get it real close to the actual length that you want. And if you missed any clipping the loops there, you can get that now too. I like to trim the head just a little bit flat, looks more realistic. And then take the gills and trim that flush with the back of the head there, so you get a real nice gill pattern then. So that's the wool head sculpin. Go ahead and try it, tie it. It's a nice pattern, and it works just about everywhere that I've tried it.
Hi, my name is Tom Mahoney from Martinez, California. Today I'm going to show you a McVeigh's Gotcha, which is a bonefish fly. It's a fairly simple fly. It's almost like one of the Charlie series. And here's one of them on a hook. And what we're going to do is tie it on a tube, which ends up looking like so. You can go ahead and use smaller diameter tubes and shorter flies. It just, everything's up to you. take the, this happens to be a Norlander vise, and it's a Norlander tube attachment on here. You slip the tube over this mandrel. We're using pink thread on this, which is the normal color for it. And we're just building up a thread base. Okay, now we put on a set of bead chain eyes, or it's your decision on how fast you want this fly to sink. You may use the plastic beads for a very slow sink rate. Next would be your bead chain eyes, and the last would be your dumbbell eyes. Depends on how fast and what kind of water you're working. You X them on, which no matter which one you use. Get them nice and tight, and then it's a lot easier to put adhesive on here, and I'm using like Sally Hansen nail polish, and that works fine. Then we go toward the back of the fly. This is a woven mylar. A guy named Ray Radley has it and sells it at these shows and stuff. And I put one on the top and one 180 degrees from the top. This is going to be your tail. You can always cut off more, but you can't add it very easily. Now this is also going to be your body. Should just do it by hand. Anyway, you're going to have to come up to the front now, and you put it over the eyes, one of the eyes, lock your thing and drop your bobbin. Now, before you run it forward, put a little bit of nail polish or some head cement on the thread wraps. Now, you take this and you wind it on, make a nice, you can either do it real light or real heavy, it's up to you. Also, go over the eyes, back around, back over, around. You do this a couple times, build up this around the eyes so you don't see thread in between. Now, bring this back, and what you do is you're going to tie this off like this. Now, once you have enough on here, you're going to put your, this is a light tan kip tail or calf tail. You can use, some people use craft fur at this. It has a little bit shinier sheen to it, but I like the calf tail. To me, it has a little bit more body, and it has better action. Measure it up so that it goes back here maybe a 1/4 inch past the body, end of the body. Okay, you tie one bunch on like that. You take another piece of this braided mylar and put it out about the same length as the wing. Take another batch of kip tail and go over that. Take the under fur out, size it up, pre-trim it. Yep. Pulled it a little too hard and it came out from underneath that one thread wrap. You have to get it right. It's almost a duck quill pinch just about. That's correct. Now this fly has about a 1/4 inch nose on it is what they tie, most of the guides tie it. It's kind of like a fish key in on that color. Now you do a whip finish. I usually do a 3-turn whip finish, and then I do a second one. Now, we're just about finished with this fly. We just have a couple little operations to it, a little cement and everything. You don't need any thread anymore. Salt is very hard on most materials and stuff, so you're better off putting a little bit more cement than you think. On this braid, you kind of fix it up so that the mylar is protected from the fish's sharp teeth, but it also makes the mylar change into like a light peacock sheen, and then and that's good for you. Now you take one of these that's the mylar and you can on-braid it. It's just like having a bunch of pearlescent strands here. You have to go through about 3 places. If you start way down at the base, it will not unravel. You do like about a third, another third, and then down at the base. Okay. You also come up back here on this wing, in between the 2 wings, and you unravel that also. That way, when this wing moves at all, it sparkles just like the whole body. Gives the imitation of movement, and I also think that the fish thinks that it's scales and stuff. Now, the last thing you do, you finish off there, and then you bring it off this mandrel, and it went on real easy, but you've tightened thread on it and everything, and it gets very tight. You bring it off with possibly a pair of squirt nose pliers, hold it by the eye. You bring the tail apart, and you go down and you leave about 1/4 of an inch, if that. Then you take this plastic, or it's a soft plastic tubing, and you go over this, and you have to just play with it until it gets over and comes down, and you bring it down on there. Now you leave about 1/4 of an inch of this material, and this is what's going to hold the hook in there, or help hold the hook. You take on the front side, you trim it within about 1/16 of the nose, and the way you're going to fish this is with a short shank hook. It can be straight eye or anything, and what you do is you run your leader through the fly, tie the short shank hook on with a Palomar knot or whatever you prefer, and then you pull this in, and it goes into the hook, or into the tube. The hook gets in there, it's nestled just the way you want it. Your eyes are going to be the bottom of this. If you prefer, you can have the hook upright, which is what I use. The other thing is that there's a lot of commercially available tubes, but you can also, like the one I just did, is on a coffee stirrer. They're cheap. You go ahead and buy a couple of cups of coffee. Starbucks has these dark ones. Another branch has these red ones. You can go ahead and do that. If you want to do small tube flies, usually you have different mandrels. You can buy the commercial ones, or you get these Q-tips, which are hollow, and you use that. And that way your fish is smaller in diameter, and you can make small trout flies. Or that would be size 10 trout flies. I've never tried to do anything smaller than that. You can do floating flies, you can gurglers, whatever you want on tubes. This is just a method of tying, not a particular pattern. And that's all I have for you today. I thank you very much.